And for the record, this is exactly what I was hoping would happen.
All right, this is crazy.
Thank you so much for watching Leaf by Leaf. My guest on this inaugural episode of the Author Talk series is Adam Levin. He was born in the Chicago suburbs, where he attended a Jewish kindergarten and then a public school with Hebrew extracurriculars multiple times a week until he finished high school. In Hebrew school, he had incredible teachers who would entertain any and all questions. And judging by his character, Gurion ben Judah Maccabee, in the instructions, I presume Adam asked more than a few questions. Then he moved to the city and pretty much stayed there, save for a stint in Syracuse when he took his MFA under the tutelage of such luminaries as George Saunders. Yet he also has a master's in social work and was a therapist for a while. He studied cognitive behavioral therapy and has found much insight in the notorious behaviorist B.F. Skinner. Really, though, he wanted to be a bassist in a band. But since his bandmates didn't take it as seriously as he did, he started reading and writing like crazy. Vonnegut, Salinger, DeLillo, Roth, and McCarthy are indelible pillars in his foundation as a reader. He has had an exemplary, an enviable career by my lights. The MFA at Syracuse, a 1,000-page debut novel in hardcover with McSweeney's, though I should note that he has said he's not particularly drawn necessarily to reading big books, followed by a short story collection called Hot Pink, also from McSweeney's, short stories published in the Holy Grail of the New Yorker, 2 novels with Doubleday, first Bubblegum, then Mount Chicago, and now a reissue of his first book in 2 volumes with stunning artwork. Adam likes to point out, though, that his wife, novelist Camille Bordas, had her very first short story published in the New Yorker, and it was written in her second language. So he's really just catching up. It took him 9 years to write and obsessively edit the instructions, 2 years of which he had to write standing up at a desk because of a pinched nerve in his back. The novel grew to what one early reviewer called a forest clearer. But Adam disdains labels for the most part, for books and for writers. Big book and Jewish author don't do much in the way of usefulness. Though he is Jewish and American and a writer, he prefers, if you must affix labels, weird novelist or maybe comic writer. His process is very organic and driven by feel. He does not plan or outline or plot. He writes a sentence that he likes, then a following sentence that he likes, and so on, until he discovers where it takes him. Perhaps this partly explains why his prose maintains a style that is inventive and surprising, even when it's just describing the most quotidian things. He is superstitious about talking of his work in process, so I won't ask about that during this time, but he always has work in progress. He was truly born to write. When Adam and I first started emailing each other in June 2022, I made the inevitable Adam Levine comment, to which he responded, "That Adam Levine, wrecking my Google, wrecking my life." The delivery, down to the punctuation, was so good, so effective, that I still think about it all the time, just like his fiction. Adam Levin, at long last, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm really psyched to talk to you. I enjoy your show, and yeah, I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you, man. And I appreciate you being here too, because as you were telling me before we started recording, you're now coming off of your leg of the book tour in New York, 3 days without sleep, hopping up on coffee.
Hopping up on coffee.
Yeah. So maybe if everybody watches and listens closely, we can kind of track when the caffeine starts spiking in your system throughout the talk.
You're louder and very boring.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're incapable of being boring, or at least your books are. So let's see how it stacks up. Now, what I'm going to try to do with this talk is I'm going to try to avoid stuff that I've heard you talk about in other places. I tried to comb through and find all the other podcasts and shows or stuff on YouTube, articles, things like that, so that I can kind of scratch out stuff and we can maybe focus on some fresher material and maybe discover something that hasn't been talked about before.
All right.
Anybody who's watched the show, they know that it's not really that I forget to kind of set up the plot or give a context. It's just, I'm never really drawn to doing that because I just kind of feel like you can read the back of the cover yourself, or you can go any number of places on the internet and read for yourself. And I'm not going to try to come up with my own words because my introduction, I feel like, was lengthy enough. First question. I noticed that unlike all the other characters in the book, Gurian's dialogue does not appear within quotation marks. In fact, on page 921, he tells the crisis negotiator, "Don't ever put quotes around my words again," which I found really nice. Yet on pages 621 and 1016, Gurian's words do appear within quotes. I verified this against the hardcover and against the new edition that arrived yesterday. So the first thing I wanted to ask, are those quotes on 621 and 1016, are they deliberate?
Well, I kind of remember doing something like that, but I would have to see the quotes, and then I could probably tell you. Do you have them at hand?
Yeah, I do.
For all I know, this is a typo. But it sounds familiar that I decided at some point that there would be a couple lines in quotes.
Okay. All right. So the first one on 621, this is where he says the kid's jaws were crab-appled with teeth clenching. I said, this is Benji Nakamuk. This is Nakamuk, okay? I think this is...
Go on.
Okay, so it seems like maybe this isn't deliberate.
It seems, yeah, I'm taken aback. Okay, wait. So wait, hold on. I want to see it. Do you mind? Let me grab it.
Absolutely. Good. And for the record, this is exactly what I was hoping would happen.
All right, this is crazy. Oh, that's crazy. No, that's just a total fucking error. That's nuts. All right.
Excellent. That's what I was hoping for.
I'm pretty sure that's an error. That's nuts, man. I was like fine-tooth combing this. That's okay. Kids, I'm trying to, like, I'm doubtful that I would make this error, but I must have. Yeah, no, that's an error. That's an error.
All right, believe it or not. Okay, first of all, for everyone watching, I want to assure you that this book is meticulously edited. And when I brought this up to a friend of mine who just read this for the first time, and he is actually a professional translator from the Japanese to the English, and he's very, very meticulous. He even was blown away that he didn't notice. And he's normally catching stuff all the time. Like, these books are very, very well done. That's why I was like, okay, either this is just somehow an error that slipped through, or it's deliberate. So I just want to assure everybody, like, Eli Horowitz, who was your editor with this, right? And you, like, killer job, because the syntax does have idiosyncrasies. This isn't your straightforward novel all the way through. And the fact that you've got a constraint for 1,030 pages where Gurian, his dialogue isn't going to appear in quotes, whereas everybody else's does, like, that imposes a lot on keeping things tight. And hopefully. So you did a killer job. All right. And then the other one is on 1016.
Okay.
And there are actually two of them. So, like, about the same place.
That was deliberate. I'm seeing it. That was deliberate. As to what, I remember, my eye went straight to it, and I was like,
bingo.
That's,
all right, and that makes sense, because that's literally repeated. He even says, "I said to the 1,000 soldiers," and then on the second one, "I said to the soldiers."
Yeah,
so
he's quoting the prayer, right, from the beginning.
Yeah,
so it's like there's like, this is like, and I mean, he's writing those blessings throughout the book. So that's him. Yeah, that one was deliberate. Man,
he's quoting himself.
One bumps me out. I better get a new edition.
No, don't be bummed, because I'm hoping that I've just kicked this video series off on my channel with being the one person in the whole world who found that.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do with that is not embarrass you or show that, like, something got missed or there's an error, I assure you. But I wanted to use that to highlight something. And it's actually something I read in Chuck Palahniuk's nonfiction book, Consider This. And he's actually quoting Joy Williams. And I love this because I actually really went after breaking out as a creative writer for a long time. And eventually I learned why I'm not meant to do that. And this gets at it. And it follows what we just looked at in your book. But Joy Williams said that writers must be smart enough to hatch a brilliant idea, but dull enough to research it, keyboard it, edit and re-edit it, market the manuscript, revise it, re-revise it, review the copy edit, proofread the typeset galley, slog through the interviews, such as this one, and write the essays to promote it. And finally, to show up in a dozen cities and autograph copies for thousands or tens of thousands of people. And I remember the first time I read that, I thought, oh, that's exactly what crushed me, because I would get super excited about the idea of having a book out there, you know, or I'd have this idea for the book and I'd go after it and I'd pour myself out into it. And I'd be like, sorry, friends and family, I'm writing right now. I can't come to dinner, you know, and then I'm done. Like, I don't even want to see that thing again, you know, on my first draft, especially with a book like yours. I was just thinking, this is how I know that you are born to write, because you've seen this 1,030 page book with lots of unconventional stuff going on. You know, because of these quotation marks, this restriction, you and your editors, you can't just do a find and replace. You can't just look for I said, you know, because he might be talking about someone else who said I said. You know, it imposes a very meticulous process through and through. And so I was just thinking, I burn out right after I write something. Very first draft, I'm done with it. I'm burnt out. Even if people bring it to my attention, I just don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. But you have just really borne that out. And I think this really proves what it takes if you really want to be a writer and really make a career out of it, the dedication, I guess, that it takes. And even then, something can still slip through.
Yeah, that slipped through. That drives me a little nuts. It's
oh no.
No, that's all right. No, I'll get over it. But no, I mean, I think it's interesting. The Poic Quote is interesting. I find, like, and because, see, I guess I'm extremely slow as a writer. So, like, the thing is, I reread what I've worked on a lot, like, very frequently, like, as I'm going along. So I think one of the reasons that I never had to do a find and replace thing, and, like, I probably never even, like, looked for an error like this, because from the beginning, like, really early on when Gorian starts talking in the book, I kind of remember just making this decision, like, on a gut level. And then I was like, what does that mean? I was like, I want him to not be in quotes, and I want other people to be. And it was, I think the first time I thought, well, it allows me, because the book, there's like there's a rhythmic movement to everything. I mean, every writer has some rhythm, and, like, there was some rhythm that I was trying to get to. And I think that the first time I didn't put the quotes down, it had to do with me wanting to insert an extra I said, like, just for sound. And then this became, like, the way Gorian was going to talk, because he says I said a lot. And you kind of need it when you don't have the quotes, if you don't want the reader to be distracted by figuring out whether Gorian is speaking or someone else is speaking, or no one is speaking and it's Gorian as the narrator speaking rather than the character. But as far as that Poic Quote, I never write fast. So my thing is, I get up and I stare at the screen and write very, very slowly and rewrite sentences like 800 times in most mornings. And if I have, like, a really productive day, I think the most productive day I've had ever was probably like 5 pages, right? And that'll be like an 8 or 9 hour day, and I've written 5 pages, and I'm very nervous about it, because I think that's way too much to have written in 8 or 9 hours. And so so I'm real slow. And so I think maybe that's what, like, allows me to sustain interest, as weird as that sounds. I'm very interested in the shapes of the sentences and how they sound. And so the story itself, which is going to be inherently interesting to me because that's what I'm pursuing, it's never blown. It's never like I've gotten to the end and now, oh shit, I have to go back and revise it until the very end, until it's till year 8 or whatever.
Right.
and then by that point, I haven't looked probably at the first 100 pages in a couple of years.
It was Philip Roth who wrote a page a day, right?
I think it was, he said different things as far as I've been able to track, but I remember there was a part, it was in Human Stain, where his neighbor comes over and his neighbor wants him to write a book about his life because the neighbor himself tried to write the book and he worked on it every day for 6 months.
Oh, that's right.
He got rid of it. and Zuckerman, the narrator, who is pretty much a stand-in for Roth. I think you never know how much is stand-in and how much is, fiction, but
Sure.
he's
Yeah.
really blown away that the guy was able to abandon 6 months of work, and he talks about how hard it is for him to abandon 2 weeks of work, and I thought that I kind of doubted that to be true. Like
Yeah.
it's a bummer. But I'll abandon like 2 or 3 months. I don't really. I have abandoned 6 months of work. It's just like it's actually a relief when you abandon. You're like, I was going down the wrong path. So yeah, I don't know what my point was. But Roth, Roth writing a book a day. I mean, yeah, maybe that's true, and maybe that was at the end and not so much at the beginning or something.
Yeah.
But I feel like he's written about writing through different points throughout his career. So
yeah, true. Yeah, I may have been from that PBS special that I heard that.
Yeah,
I think they were catching him. I don't know. Maybe he was 75 by then or something.
Yeah, so he's in that last quartet of books.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
At that point.
But I was the total opposite. I loved the idea of being a writer, but then the actual work that it takes, with writing, because of what it really takes to pull the stuff off and to do it well, it can't be circumvented. Like there really aren't any shortcuts,
I mean, yeah, if you want to write something good, that's probably true. But you never know, man. Different people. I know a lot of writers. I know a lot of good writers and even a few great writers, and they all really work very differently. So it's some of them. To me, like the main thing is there's sort of like streakers and there's like marathon runners. I'm stealing this term. I feel like I think Salvador Valencia gave me that back in grad school because he's a streaker or was, and so he would like lock himself in and like write, not do anything else for like 80 hours at a time or something, and then wouldn't write for 3 months. Wow. And I would never do that. And I have to wake up and work every morning. And it's basically
I'm just realizing that streaker doesn't mean what I originally thought.
Oh no, it's not like streaker. No, it's no.
I was like, okay, yeah. I mean,
maybe the word was sprinter and streaker is just
so that's the idea.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just think a lot of people do, they go a lot of different ways. So and I maybe some of it actually is about what you can get away with circumventing, like like what kind of brain you have, like what's gonna whether you can hold the thing in your brain very well, or if you can't. There's advantages to not being able to hold things in your brain so well, I'd imagine, which is that they're maybe going to feel more immediate. I don't know. I have a writer friend who's pretty successful who has the whole thing written in his head and then hides out for a couple days and writes it.
That's
and he's
wild.
pretty much done. Yeah, but it happens, once every few months, and he walks around and thinks about what book he's going to write, and then he does it. And
amazing.
Me, if I did that, if I knew it was going to happen, I would not do it. I would not be able to write it. I'd be bored. I have to be trying to figure out what's going to happen.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. On the back of my paperback, I see that quote from Rolling Stone that begins evocative of David Foster Wallace.
Yeah.
So we got it. Of course, David Foster Wallace is going to come up, but I'm not headed into that territory of, the personal lives of authors. You've made it clear elsewhere that really, you just don't care that much about the personal life behind the book and how that should affect our reading. And, I'm very much in the same boat. Where I'm headed, though, is I just wonder what you, as an author, think about such blurbs in terms of reader expectations of your work. And I'm thinking about how Thomas Pynchon blurbed Nog by Rudolf Wurlitzer early on. And this seems to have been really counterproductive for Wurlitzer because so many people then panned the book on grounds that it wasn't like Thomas Pynchon.
Right.
And then, similarly, I noticed that Jonathan Lethem name dropped Gravity's Rainbow on the front cover of Ed Park's latest book. Now, of course, Ed Park's latest book, it just won the Los Angeles Book Prize for Fiction. So, it could be that more people were reading and in tune with Pynchon back in the time of Nog than they are now. But in any case, for me, I would find it both thrilling to see David Foster Wallace put on the, jacket of my book, but also a little daunting because now I'm aware that readers are going to possibly apply a sort of DFW expectation rubric to my work instead of allowing my work to develop an Adam Levin expectation rubric.
Yeah, that's a thing. That was a thing for sure. I mean, at the time, my feeling was and I think still is that, there's a level of bullshit with what goes on a cover, right? Like there's just like, it's because it's a sales pitch, and it's like, it's nothing against anyone unless we're going to, indict the whole country, like the way everything works. But the first thing to my mind that I wanted a book cover to do always was to get someone in the store to pick it up so that they would open it. And because you imagine everyone buys books like you do. The way I buy a book is I'm at the shop, I see whatever. I pick up a lot of books. I buy a lot of books, and I pick them up and I usually read the opening. I never read the back of the book, but I usually read the opening, and I usually then flip ahead. If the opening's solid, I flip ahead a few pages and see if the sentences are still good or if it was just a hot open. And if the answer is good opening and they're still good, I'm usually going to buy the book. And so I realize not a lot of people actually do that way. There are a lot of people that do, but most people, they're not thinking to themselves, wow, I'm giving myself permission to buy as many books as I want, which is something that I've done for many years. That's what I spend money on.
I think it's very healthy.
For me, it is for sure. And so it's like, I don't feel like it's ever really a waste of money. I bought books that I think are crap frequently, but on the off chance that they weren't, I'm like, this is worth it. And so I know other people don't approach books the same way, those people, they maybe need to hear something like evocative of David Foster Wallace to even pick the thing up and open it to the first page. So I can't complain about that. Like, it didn't hurt me. The book did pretty well. So it's like, when it gets a bit annoying is when someone then actually expects it to be like David Foster Wallace. It's almost as though they haven't seen these things before, because there's very few situations where you see a book compared to something like, I mean, Pinchonian's a big, there are these phases of sort of blurb and review language. We used to joke about it in school. Like the phrase was, on acid is the new Kafkaesque, because you had Kafkaesque and you had Pinchonian, and then it would be it's like Raymond Carver on acid, or and then later people subbed acid for meth, and it's just all these things where
that's true.
They're giving a vague sense, right? And so I don't think anyone who's read more than a few of those actually expects a book to be like how it's described. Or maybe they do, and I'm just crazy. But so
that's funny.
The short answer is it felt more flattering than it did dangerous. And and honestly, it's like if someone picks up my book and starts reading it and likes it enough to buy it and then finishes it and doesn't like it, then I'm like, oh, that sucks. But if someone bought it because it said evocative of David Foster Wallace, and then and then they read it and they're like, this isn't like David Foster Wallace, therefore I don't like it. I can't take that too seriously. So I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, so two questions. Or first of all, am I hearing Gogol right now?
Oh no, yeah, you are. I hear him. He's loud.
That's excellent. A bird that I've only read about, I'm now hearing in real life. That's pretty cool.
I could maybe try to quiet him if you
No, leave it in. It gives us a sort of like a nature documentary. David Attenborough will be here in a second to give a voiceover. And also, just really quickly, why there are many pairs of scissors behind you?
Yeah, I feel like I lose scissors and then I buy them and then I find the old ones. And you don't throw scissors away, right? So yeah, I think there's only two right there, but I think we have probably like 10 pairs of scissors in the house. I don't know. I hardly use scissors. It's just like,
I was just wondering, are you a big like coupon clipper, or you guys do a lot of arts and crafts together there?
I honestly, I don't, and I started carrying a knife, and so I don't even know what I use scissors for. Like, I don't think I've used either of those scissors in ages. Like, I have this,
that's
like,
a trip.
Ferber. And
it really stood out to me because it's the same here. I never use scissors. I thought, wow.
Yeah. Too many scissors.
All right. Yeah. McSweeney's will forever be a sort of publishing superhero for me.
Yeah.
And this is partly why, in addition to obviously the instructions in hot pink, but in 2003, McSweeney's published The Unabridged Rising Up and Rising Down by William T. Vollmann. It's a 4,000-page manuscript written over 2 decades of literally death-defying journalism and investigation and thinking and writing. And this behemoth taxed the entire team at McSweeney's, including Dave Eggers himself, Eli Horowitz, your editor, on the instructions. This exhaustively researched tome culminated in a 76-page axiomatic moral calculus for determining whether or not violence is justified. After reading your book in its new edition, I took the liberty of transposing Volman's philosophical framework into a computer program, because as you know, I'm a computer guy. Then I carefully and thoroughly ran your book through the system, which includes specific checks and balances for violence committed in the context of cultural identity, of religion, and of revolution. Mm-hmm. Because of the size of your input material and the excruciating depth of Volman's calculus, it took several days to process and almost crashed my computer twice. But just in time for our discussion right now, the program finished. All right?
Okay.
And the result reads as follows. Jargon parse error 405, unknown word, Banter.
That's hilarious.
I was hoping that would come off.
That's pretty great. Yeah, Banter. It's very tricky AIs, man.
When I look up Banter, there's only an Urban Dictionary entry out there.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that its definition is what you're using in the instructions. I feel like it's very much your thing. But I just wanted to ask, it's not like a localized, like regional, like Chicago thing, right? This is, I can't find anything on it.
Yeah, I've only ever heard one guy say it one time. And he's a guy who... It stuck because I thought he's a very funny, he was like a very charismatic dude. I used to hang out with him in high school. We did, kind of a lot of drugs together. And he said, he's just like, I see this guy, it's total fucking Banter, And I was like, I thought it was hilarious. And like, it stuck with me for,
I love that.
30 years.
Have you seen The Bear?
Yeah. I love The Bear.
Yeah. Cousin Richie?
Yeah.
That's kind of who, when you just did that, it made me think of Cousin Richie.
Yeah, he was Cousin Richie if Cousin Richie was actually extremely smart. But yeah, he was this sort of dangerous dude. Like,
I love that. So, it's crazy. And you do this. Some of your neologisms, I can see where they come from. Like when you use different notable people's last names, but you lowercase it and turn it into an adjective, like Chomsky. And I think you had Kaufman in there. You had Yossarian was used as an adjective, So some of those I understand. But Banter is interesting because, I've never heard this before, but somehow it's just right. It just feels right. Like that's definitely what these kids said.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to describe in my mind, it's the only thing that kind of describes what I want. It's like, I feel like a Banter, if there was some like archetypal Banter, he's just a real dickhead, but he's also clumsy. Like it's like he can't bring it off, It's like he's the worst. He's the worst. There's no grace in his being a dickhead.
Just like a Banter.
He's a Banter.
I love that. All right, so the instructions is Gurian's scripture. And as presented to us, it has been translated and retranslated from the Hebrew and the English by Eliyahu of Brooklyn and Emmanuel Liebman, who are characters in the book, of course. This immediately puts me in the mind of Don Quixote, where Cervantes tells us that his book was actually based on another book by an Arab Muslim historian, and I'll butcher this name, but Sid Hamid Benengeli, and it has also been through translations. Don Quixote, of course, is specifically cited in the Story of Stories. I've arranged the contents in a fiction-y way that withholds certain information to the last to keep you in suspense. And I've done so by means of frames, like how Cervantes does in Don Quixote. I also see a connection between Gurian and Don Quixote, the character, in that both have consumed a very specific type of literature to a degree that has literally altered their world. Gurian has gorged on Torah, Talmud, and Zohar to the degree that he's now a potential messiah. And Quixote, of course, gorged on chivalric romances to the point that he is a knight errant. Both, which this is where I think it's interesting, is that both consequently harm the people around them. And I've got in mind, of course, Nabokov lectures a lot on the violence that Quixote causes. And I've heard, you mention Cervantes a lot. I know that you've read it. I know you enjoy it. But beyond that, what do you make of this connection between the Don Quixote type and the Gurian type?
I think you pretty much nailed it. Like, and I think there was something where I'm trying to think back because I haven't read Don Quixote in a long time. There being these two parts, and they're having like one, like, I feel like the second part in Don Quixote, the second part is written sort of with the reaction to the first part in mind,
yes,
very overtly.
Exactly.
And similarly in the instructions, and there's this, the retranslation thing. I wonder if I thought that through in part from that bit from Don Quixote that you mentioned. But I think, I wonder if that brought it to mind. But I think what I was going for there was this notion of what a perfect text would be, and like how someone would be reasonable in deciding that a text was perfect. And I was like, well, that's as near to it as you could, because the logic is,
sure,
he writes the one in one language, shows it to his friend who translates it, shows the translation to another friend who translates it back into the original language without seeing it first, and they match up. And so this indicates that the word is the word. Like, he got it so right. And that's very much in Gurian's personality to demonstrate something like that. But yeah, I think that I think you nailed it. I think he's steeped in all of these religious texts, where Don Quixote was steeped in tales of knights errant. And I think the main distinction, because I think Gurian is very aware of it. There's like a couple like silly like wordplay jokes where he calls himself a quick tzaddik, and like, and I think that he's aware of this potential narrative of him having a quixotic, of himself having a quixotic narrative that he's living in. But at the same time, as the book unfolds, there are things, for instance, like Don Quixote, regardless of what you could make arguments about his bravery or something, or like what he wants to do, but he's not very effective as a knight errant. Whereas Gurian is actually kind of scary. Like, in a
absolutely.
way. So it's I think he's like, I know about this, and I'm not that. I think that there was some kind of rhetorical thing I was trying to do there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that foremost point of the whole translated and retranslated is because later we find out that, that's how he proves to himself that he's presented this perfect text, is because as we know, a literary text translated from one to another. I mean, this is never going to happen.
Never.
But that'll come up here in just a little bit. So I'm glad we've got that out there. In the beginning of the book, we get a disclaimer from the publisher, which seeks to avoid getting canceled for publishing this work because of the controversy over its author. It assures us that our purchase in no way lines the pockets of a psychopathic terrorist. Ironically, though, this also serves to heighten our interest in the same way that banning books enhances their allure. We also get hooks that I think allow us to commit even more to the long read, such as crimes relating to the damage proper, the 1117 miracle, or any other event pertaining to the Gurionic War. So right from the beginning, we know that what is this damage proper? There's going to be this miracle that now goes by a date name, which anything that has 11 in it. I know you picked 1117 because you said it has a particular ring for you. But I think most of us now can't help but think of something like 9/11, of course. But when something gets labeled like that,
for sure,
it just, something big's happening, and then full on war. So we know we're leading up. We've got a promise of major events in the book whose payoff is large enough to allow us, of course, to give you your space, I think, to build this world, to build Gurian's consciousness. Then it all ends with this. Conscientious readers need not be troubled. And I love this. And I have my interpretation of what it means. But in your words, why is it that a conscientious reader wouldn't or shouldn't be troubled by such clarifications that this disclaimer has to put there?
I mean, it's sort of making fun of those disclaimers on the whole, because that's basically what they're all saying. I think the notion, I mean, on the face of it is just, you want to read about this thing, about this bad guy. This guy you think is a bad guy, but you want to have an excuse that you want to make it okay. You know, and it's,
Yes.
you know, this is pre cancel culture or whatever we call what this
Right.
stuff is. So, but there was always that part of it. It was like
Sure.
people don't want to give their money to whoever, to a terrorist, you know? And so, yeah, I think it was, I was mocking it a little. I think the publisher, you know, David Feldman, I think I gave his name.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I made up some publisher.
I didn't know if it was a nod towards Sid Feldman.
Possibly. I mean, like, no, I mean, Sid Feldman, I think, I know there's a friend of mine named Sid Feldman who I pop him into books once in a while. I like his name.
Yeah.
It's a great name. It actually,
I noticed Christian Tabordo showed up as Catherine Tabordo.
Oh, that's Christian's wife. Yeah.
Okay.
She's a choreographer. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I managed to get the names of a lot of people I'm fond of in my book, but especially the instructions. There's like, anytime there's like a list of names, it's usually like I'm splitting a first name from a last name between two people, and
I just love that. I thought that's a funny little touch, you know. I mean, just that disclaimer, it kind of could be used to introduce people to your writing, because it's got kind of everything you do packed into it. And
Thanks,
I heard, I can't remember which podcast or whatever, it might have been with the Concavity guys, with Matt and Dave, that you were bringing up that at the time you happened to be reading the Executioner Song by Norman Mailer. And
when I was in the podcast, yeah,
when you're in the podcast, and you know, that kind of made me think about that celebrity of criminal. And you know, now I'm not sure, because it seems like true crime now has taken off as this genre, you know, where like now I'm not even sure we need that disclaimer, even though there is cancel culture. Cancel culture is, it's just for certain things and not others, you know.
Sure.
Like cancel culture, like you said, it's always kind of been there, but now it's kind of got its own rubric it uses to evaluate certain things. But criminals, serial killers, I mean, it's almost glorified at this point. But, you know, at the time that Mailer came out with the Executioner Song, and I mean, I wasn't alive. I think it won the Pulitzer in '76 or something like that.
I'm not sure what year.
Yeah, I remember reading it for the first time, and I could not put it down. And
that's an amazing book.
There was a part of me that thought, in a way, I did feel myself, you know, like sort of that tension of I'm pulling for this guy who has done horrible things.
Yeah. And that's great. I think that's great, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's what you've done here.
Oh, thank you, man.
But you've got even more tension, like back and forth.
Yeah.
This is the third time I've read it. And this time around, I started really noticing more moments where his age really shows. Him being 10 years old.
Yeah.
I know he's older at the time of writing, but he's writing of a time when he was 10, right? So one of many things that early reviewers got wrong, by the way. And for anyone watching, please don't read any of the early reviews. You're just terrible. I noticed more, like, especially when he's love struck by June Watermark. Waterman. Watermark? Watermark. Yeah. And I was like, wait, that's not, Waterman's Jewish. She's a goy. Well, she's a shiksa. A shiksa. It's got to be Watermark. Yeah. So I noticed like this, like discombobulates him and kind of throws him off. And there are other times where there are these slippages. And so I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, wait, as smart as he is and as like kind of scary and lethal as he is, like he is really a kid. So I think you really did pull it off well.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think of him as being like, because I think like, I don't think I romanticize kids at all. Like, I don't think. And like, I think that my thought was always that kids really are, they're very smart in the end, but they're not articulate, and I'm talking even smart kids, that they tend not to be articulate, and they're emotionally morons. Like the thing that it's so like, and so Gorian, like the hope was he has the emotions of a 10-year-old, but he is somehow actually completely articulate. Like that this is the, so he can, you know, because in the end there's a way to read the book. I'm not saying this is the way to read the book, because I don't do that. But like, there's a way to read the book where like anything that he's doing, any justification he's making, no matter what he's referring to, is just like he wants to do something, and so he's going to make a really complicated argument for it that will win. Like, and he's very good at logic. and he will sneak in a bullshit premise to and then work forward from there. But really, he's just saying, I wanted to hit this kid, or I thought this girl was beautiful. Like, and and like, that's one way, that's the sort of, I don't know, so I thought of him that way at certain points. When I was rereading it for the revision, I was like, but
did you consciously put his father in as a lawyer to kind of make that connection of Gurian's own kind of maybe inherited lawyerliness?
Sort of. I mean, I think that I had his father as a lawyer because, for a number of reasons. There's first like a plot thing. It's hard to remember what comes first. Like like I think, like I said, usually it's the sentences. There was some kind of thought where you have this mother who is this badass, and there's a bit of a general
IDF
reverse.
commando.
Yeah, and then the father is this sort of like, he's like kind of peaceful, religious, ex-religious guy.
Yeah,
and I think that's I think there's also just something that's true to life about that, where I think that a lot of Orthodox Jews who leave, a lot of like who were studying Torah as young men, or like I think that they for a while at least were becoming lawyers. I think it was like when they leave the religion, it's like they have this, like, if you're studying Talmud, you have a very legalistic brain if you're any good at it. And so if you like it, but you just don't believe in God. Yeah, I mean, because you sit around looking at really, really brilliant rabbis argue. That's what Talmud is a bunch of rabbis arguing. Yeah. So it's like, so this is going to develop your capacity for logic and for rhetoric. And if you walk away but you miss it, maybe you're going to become a lawyer, because that gives you this opportunity to keep doing it without having to believe in any kind of divine thing.
Yeah. You can take Rashi and Rambam straight into the courtroom.
100%.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah, it maps perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, they're close readers. So.
All right. In the blessings over the book's two parts, also, there's a little bit of a theological cosmogony that's presented that I think contrasts well with the beginning of Sheila Heti's Pure Color. Have you read this book?
I've not.
I think it's brilliant. This is how her book opens. This is the very first page. After God created the heavens and the earth, he stood back to contemplate creation, like a painter standing back from the canvas. This is the moment we are living in, the moment of God standing back. Who knows how long it has been going on for? Since the beginning of time, no doubt. But how long is that? And for how much longer will it continue? You'd think it would only last a moment, this delay of God standing back, before stepping forward again to finish the canvas. But it appears to be going on forever. But who knows how long or short this world of ours seems from the vanishing point of eternity. Now the earth is heating up in advance of its destruction by God, who has decided that the first draft of existence contained too many flaws. All right, I think it contrasts well with Gurian's blessing, because this is new to me. I haven't kind of heard this angle before. Some damage is but destructive, and other damage through destruction repairs. It is often impossible, especially while the damage is being brought, to distinguish between the one kind and the other. But because and you is capitalized to denote that he's talking to Adonai or God. But because you've made scholars who know the distinction, we fight to forgive you. Because you know that your mistakes, though a part of you, are nonetheless mistakes, we accept that your mistakes, though yours, are ours to repair. So it's like your book inverts the tableau that Heti presents in this first draft of creation that we're living in, or that the characters and the instructions are living in. We don't wait for God to step forward and complete the canvas. We ourselves take up the paintbrush or the penny gun, as it were.
Yeah. No, that's. I think that's really our point, and I think that's like, to some degree, it's a pretty common Jewish notion that we're supposed to perfect the world, right? Like, we're here, like, human beings are here to get the world better and better. Mm-hmm. The people who believe that tend not to think that means doing any violent thing, and Gurian does. I mean, Gurian, that's like his first kind of like manipulative move, or clever move. Like, but that is his notion. Is, because he's not. I think throughout the book, he's very much not someone who is he doesn't talk about loving God. He doesn't love God. Like I don't think he dislikes. Like I think he looks at God as this force that and this that has a consciousness that has a will, that has desire and is a force, but that he's certainly not his enemy, that he's trying to obey his laws.
Sure.
But he's like, some of these laws are fucked up, obviously, because the world is fucked up. And so if I unfuck the world, I unfuck the laws. But I have to break the laws to unfuck the world. Like it's you know. So he really makes a pretty wide space for himself to Gurion. I mean, gives himself a lot of space to be violent and to execute his own will and still claim to be doing God's ultimate will, which is to get the world perfect as he claims. So as Gurion.
Yeah, you're making me think about some of the stuff I've read. Oh, who's the really famous explainer of things Kabbalah? Ah, here it is, Gershom Scholem. I couldn't think of the name, but in Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism, Gershom Scholem, I remember reading about the belief of God being, having withdrawn from the world, but there's still emanations from his consciousness, and that there, and I can't remember the names, but there are these vessels that carried his light that have been shattered.
The Sephiroth?
And that's it. Yeah. And it's up to us to repair them. But there are these archons, that try to get in the way of that. But that's Gurion's take was very different about, we need to repair you through destruction that brings reparation. On that same note, I kept thinking about Mishima's dichotomy of pen and sword, which is captured so beautifully in Paul Schrader's biopic of Mishima's life. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Paul Schrader did a biopic of Mishima's life?
He sure did. It's called Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters.
When is it from?
Oh, that I couldn't say. It's got a little bit of age on it, but Criterion has it. It's incredible. Wow. Yeah,
I'm gonna watch. That's cool, man. I just started reading him a few years ago. I really like him, and I know he had insane. Yeah, I mean, he tried to overthrow the Japanese government, right? Like
there you go.
Like unsuccessful seppuku, right? Like didn't he sort of fail at the seppuku and then died later, or am I wrong about that?
Now you're making me question. But I know that he went. Something did go awry. Like he went through with it, and it was performed, and just in the ritual way, now you're making me question.
Did he second back out or something? He didn't get beheaded?
No, he definitely didn't back out. I know that it was a botched attempt. Like he got into the government building with his clan. He had his own personal army that he had trained up, and he broke into this government headquarters and he took one of the head people hostage. And he went out on the precipice there at the building. They had him hostage and he delivered this speech, trying to get everyone to go back to the ways of the samurai and have more national pride in Japan, uphold our emperor. And they were kind of he just got laughed at. But he did go through with performing the seppuku. So it's kind of like he went through with what he had planned to do. And I think he finished his final manuscript that morning and mailed it off to his publisher. So pretty dramatic day. For him. But the biopic is incredible. And I too just started reading him. I started with The Sailor Who Fell with Grace to the Sea. I don't think that's right. Oh, okay.
The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea.
I always get it wrong every time.
With the Sea, I think. Yeah, that was the second one I read. I read Star first. I think is that what it's called? Star, the very tiny New Directions one. They put it out not that long ago. Star. I think it's about it's like 70 pages. But I read that.
You're not talking about The Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector, are you?
No.
Okay.
Star. It's Star.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's about. I think he's a rock star. It's not been a while because I read that. I read The Sailor, and then I read some short stories. But I have a couple of those other books stacked up here, and The Sailor was amazing. That was.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I watched the Paul Schrader film shortly after reading it because I thought, oh man, I got to know more about this writer.
Yeah, dark dude.
Yeah. But I kept thinking about that dichotomy that he presents in lots of his books. I'm getting this by way of the biopic of pen and sword. And, just like in the Blessings, Gurion says, show us, Adonai, when to set aside our books for weapons, for sometimes scholars must become soldiers. Then a little later in the book, Gurion repeats the same dictum, sometimes a scholar must become a soldier. And way later, I loved this, but way later, like 700 pages later, when he discovers that June Watermark has actually preempted him in the invention of the penny gun, or in her case, the pen gun. Yeah. And she disparages that cliche. She explicitly disparages the cliche, the pen is mightier than the sword. And she offers that a penny isn't mightier than a sword if you can't kill anyone with it. A pen is mightier, though, if it's a fountain pen or the nib of one. So your book, as in Mishima's life, both literalizes and double entendres the aphorism, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yeah. You're a good reader, man. Like, there's a couple things you said that I'm just like, you really nailed the thing, and I'm like, I don't know how to say anything more. You just said it really well. You said it, so it's impressive. It's really rewarding.
Well, good. Well, all right. Let me spend some more time just sort of like whatever the opposite of roasting somebody is.
What would be the opposite of roasting? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't think too much about it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let me serenade. Let me continue to serenade you about your great writing. But seriously, you're clearly acutely conscientious of language, syntax, and nonverbal mannerisms. You coin neologisms and mint dictions as needed to impart a sense of character or scene. You even toy with spelling and punctuation to capture these fine-tuned idiosyncrasies and modulate tone and mood. And I'm going beyond the instructions now at this point. And as Flowers tells Gurion, even if what you write about is boring, you can't be writing boring. This is just a sampling of some of my favorite lines that I think clearly defy boring writing. We all start off with the one sentence in there very early on that I think catches everyone off guard. But it says, I snorted up a goozy and twetched it on his toes. The air in Main Hall was blinky that morning. Dust touched light and the particles twitched. And I love that because, again, that using that adjective blinky, that captures that youthful 10-year-old Gurion, but then dust touched light and the particles twitched. Then there's that articulate, like super, unusually articulate Gurion. Just perfect. This one is incredible. And I think this is on par. I could have guessed that this was William H. Gass. I hate him the way the tongues of smart girls prefer bittersweet chocolate to milk. And you've put bittersweet together, and so that when you end on milk, it has a hyphen to denote milk chocolate. And even down to that level, I think is just really telling of these great sentences. And then the baldness of Botha. Botha?
I say
How do you pronounce it?
I like Botha. Okay. Better. Yeah.
Botha. The baldness of Botha was the kind where the hair that remains rims the head like... This gets me every time. I'm going to start over. The baldness of Botha was the kind where the hair that remains rims the head like the seat on a public toilet. My crush dies faster than a magazined spider. All right, now this is a good one. And this next one I think really exemplifies my setup of how you can say so much about a person and their whole life story just about. The voice came out of Blake Acer, his face telling stories of proudly attended semi-annual dental appointments, baggy gloved strolls beside a golden retriever, dipped cones of soft serve after Little League victories. This is just, it's phenomenal. Did you laugh when you were writing some of this stuff, like baggy gloved strolls beside a golden retriever?
Some of it, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I kind of just, yeah, that's kind of what guides me along when I'm working. I'm largely trying to make myself laugh. Like, if I make myself laugh, I keep the line. If I don't, I have to think about it for 3 hours.
I love that. Then you can turn around and you can get super capturing this love spark between June Watermark and Gurion. I'm surprised every time when I read it because that's a tough thing to do, I think, in fiction. I think intimacy, love, that romance is really tough to do. She grabbed my hands and said, "Will you do it again until my hemispheres cross fire?" And of course, if you don't have context, who knows what you're thinking really happened there. But, they're kids and they're discovering kissing each other. And there's a lot of lead up that I'm skipping over to that. But will you do it again until my hemispheres cross fire? I mean, that's brilliant. And then you kind of, I could tell you had the sense that like, that was the apotheosis of this kind of buildup. Like, don't go past that, because then it kind of comes back down, just brilliant. All right, here's the last one. He was up on his elbows, choking on phonemes. There were Chinesey cat sounds and Josha-like clicks, Tourettic stammerings, and Afrikaner diphthongs, W's that might have been L's or R's, Hebraic velar fricatives. And this is just beautiful. A storm of whistled sibilance. I mean, you had to have known writing that you got it.
I was so stuck about. I kind of remember actually like freaking out about like whether I was getting the associating. Like I had to like look up Zosha at the time. I remember I was like, what's the click language? Like I remember that sentence probably took me a couple days. Like it was. But yeah, you're right. But there was the whistled sibilance was the. That was storm. That's the end of the sentence. Yeah, storm was.
Yeah, a storm of whistled sibilance. I mean. That's beautiful, man.
Thanks, man.
So I was just going to ask you if you would mind reading page 773.
I don't think I would. I got to see what's page 773.
Yeah, I think this exemplifies Gurion heeding Flowers' advice again. But on that, where Flowers is saying, look, man, even if you're going to write about something that's boring, do it in a way that's not boring. And I think that this does that really well. And if I remember from an email you sent me, you said that Flowers is actually based on author Flowers there at Syracuse in the MFA program. Is that right? Yeah. I thought that was really neat. But yeah,
he's on the back of. There's a bust of him on the back of the new edition.
I wondered who that was.
Yeah, that's Arthur. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite things. It was like because he's on one, and then sort of paralleling him on the other is Philip Roth.
I loved that. I noticed that immediately. The little, like the mural paint, the easel painting.
Yes, easel painting.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I'm purposefully not showing the covers, especially the back covers. Yeah, because I want people to discover them on their own. The front covers are available on McSweeney's website. You can look at them, but the back covers are definitely where it's at.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad. I appreciate you having me because I think they're pretty exciting. Like to see. I remember when I saw them.
Lots of little treats. I think I noticed Gogol hidden in there. Am I right?
There's a lot of Gogols. Yeah, that was a poetic license or something because that's the one book I think there's
a little bit anachronistic.
Yeah. There's possibly a Quaker parrot in the book somewhere. I don't think so. Like, I mean, like just like in passing. But yeah, but those are very Chicago-y birds. Like Bello wrote about them because they live. There's wild ones in Hyde Park, and I mean they're all over the states now, and they're actually they're all over Europe too at this point. But they're originally from the Andes, and people had them as pets, and they escaped, and they're really good at surviving, and so like they can live through winter. And they can, even though they're, parrots, and they build these crazy nests. And so I was like, the artist was like, maybe we need a little something like, and he put some birds, and I was like, maybe make them Quakers, and he was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
and so,
why not? That's awesome. Yeah. But yeah, 773, just through the line where it says 90 seconds later, it was over.
While upstairs painkillered, my father slept deep. I prepared a forkless breakfast with my mom in the kitchen. On a breadboard on the counter, I smashed walnuts with a rolling pin. She, at the table, opened soft-boiled eggs. I liked eggs soft-boiled, but in the morning couldn't prep them. Not if I wanted to put them in my stomach. Those insect-like screams emitted by the shell when you pried its fragments from that film they clung to. The mastication of wet chicken sounded musical by comparison. Walnuts in pieces, I dumped the sip of cloudy topwater from a tub of Greek yogurt. I globbed honey from a jar across the yogurt's flat surface. I folded and stirred till the color was even, then folded some more till my mom's task was finished. When she signaled it was, I came to the table, the tub in one hand, breadboard in the other. We'd like to add the walnuts as we went. The yogurt of our forkless breakfasts was for the most part treated like dessert. Though we'd always cool our mouths before we ate our eggs, we'd only use a spoonful, never even two. While the roof blisters you'd get from a scalding one stung, nothing eggy was as nasty as a gluey, tepid yolk. Plus our egg cups, glass, were shaped like half an ostrich. And the closer the temperature of what you drew from them matched yours, the less cute the images your brain coughed up. Half-formed wings and beaks of high plasticity, goo that would be claws and bone, a pulsing spaghetti of veins and tendons, ligaments and cartilage not quite yet chewy, throbbing webbed red membranes. Our attack on the eggs was double-fisted. We spooned them up rapidly and salted with abandon. 90 seconds later, it was over.
I just think that perfectly exemplifies what Flowers is talking about. And it's also funny that, he's describing this, and this is part of his scripture. This needs to be in there as scripture. They're just making breakfast. But, yeah. I mean, I don't think I'll ever forget a pulsating spaghetti of veins and tendons.
Yeah. I think there was something where I was liking, a lot of the stuff. I obviously wrote this book over 9 years, and I think, I'm reading different things throughout. And I think there is something where it's not a very quiet book at all. And so I thought, if there was a part that was sort of quiet, that it was just a quietly observed thing, and it's, as you said, that it's going in the scripture. I thought, yeah, maybe this will sort of stand out. And it's I feel like it's a bit tender, that moment. It's between his mom, and I think it needed that at that point. All right, I felt it did at the time at least. So yeah.
Well, job well done. You are just as much a reader as a writer. In almost every discussion of yours, I jot down at least one book I've never heard of. And your enthusiasm for reading is palpable. In addition to a sumptuous helping of literary references and allusions in this book, Gurian begins wrapping up the instructions with a brief rumination on reading great books. All great books command rereading, but you can't ever read the same book twice, knowing as you do from the second reading forward that A will lead to B to Y to Z. Your post-first readings are far more concerned with what exactly happens between those events. This sounds a lot like Heraclitus, who has that famous aphorism, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river." Although he goes on to finish it, the last part of that aphorism is, "and he's not the same man," which I think pertains to a great book like I knew I was going to call it The Recognitions at some point. Forgive me. Which I think pertains to a great book like The Instructions, indeed. Gurian goes on to say that as you reread great books, you begin to appreciate its inner workings, but you sort of damage the original, more ephemeral and emotive experience of it. Comparing it to remembering the dramatic events of 1117, he says, "I know what I thought and why I thought it, and I know what I said and why I said it, but I don't remember thinking or saying any of it. I can't seem to remember the experience of it." This to me sounds a lot like what in philosophy is called qualia. Here's the Stanford definition of qualia: feelings and experiences vary widely. For example, I run my fingers over sandpaper, smell a skunk, feel a sharp pain in my finger, seem to see bright purple, become extremely angry. In each of these cases, I am the subject of a mental state with a very distinctive subjective character. There is something it is like for me to undergo each state, some phenomenology that it has. With a book, I think we can all pretty much agree on the broad events that happen. They are the objective facts of the plot. This happened, A to B, and so on, like you said. But on the level of experience, especially the first experience of a book, the nuances aren't recorded as objective fact, but I think they're rather sort of encoded in our subjective consciousness. And it's really slippery to try and go back and recapture the experience, but also kind of thrilling because we can see that the book changed us and that, in a sense, we changed the book. I think if each of us tried to really recapture that original experience of reading a great book, we would all end up writing our own In Search of Lost Times.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a thing, I think Gurian, I'm trying to get that point in the book. That's, correct me if I'm wrong, he's introducing the damage proper is his having watched all the videos. Is that
Yes,
is that
exactly.
what you're talking about? Yeah. And so I think there's also, you know, it's weird because there's like the thing about rereading, because I reread books. I'm going back to this habit of rereading. For years, I was like, I've been rereading books too many times, like, and I was not getting enough new stuff. And then really the past like 10 years, probably, I started thinking, man, I got to catch up. I got to read it. I got to read more stuff in general. But I'm going back to this rereading habit. And, you know, it is strange. The main thing that's different to my mind is that when you're going back, you're anticipating certain moments that you loved. And so you're able, like what Gorian mentions about being able to, on rereading, see better what's between the events. It's really, you're seeing how you're being manipulated to enjoy the events before the events happen. And sometimes that, in the best books, it actually improves the book. Like, it improves the experience. It's not the same experience, obviously, but it kind of radically improves it. And it's like, you know, the one, I think I don't know if it's in that section where he talks about Catcher in the Rye, but like, so that was one of the earliest. Yeah. So that was one of the earliest ones for me, where it was like the first time I read Catcher in the Rye. And I mean, the common story of reading it as a kid and reading it as an adult and how it's a completely different book. This holds, where you're reading it as a kid and you're like, Holden's the only authentic guy. And when you read it as an adult, you're like, Holden is the phoniest person in the book, basically. And like, and there's this, and neither of those is actually true. Like, the book's deeply, it's much more subtle than that. But the reaction you have the second time that he's the most phony comes, I think, from like some having been embarrassed that you thought he was so authentic.
Oh, that's interesting.
And in the meantime, you miss all this other stuff that's happening in the book, because you're the first time you read it, you're buying into this worldview. The second time, you're sort of fighting the worldview, you know, tooth and nail. And then, like, you know, maybe the third or fourth or fifth time you read it, if you're me and you're not that bright, or you didn't read it at school, like, you're like, oh, like, I'm pretty sure this guy was sexually molested. I think this is why he wants to protect children. Like, there's this scene that's crazy. It's inexplicable otherwise, really. And I think Gorian goes out of his way to be like, to claim that it's ambiguous. It's really not ambiguous.
Yeah.
Like, by today's lights, and you do this thing. I don't know. So the way a book holds up, you know, after multiple rereads has always been fascinating to me. And like I said, my favorite books I've reread many times in most cases. Like, there's some newer ones that I've loved that I haven't read as much as I would like to yet, but they really bear up more and more and become fuller and fuller. So, but you do lose that initial excitement, which I think is of discovering something new that you love. I mean, there's nothing that's like that. I'm not sure that's a better excitement though than that which arises when you understand something new about something you already love. But they are different. They're the second one is a little less intense inherently. The first one is the most intense, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like each reading, the experience of each read of a great book like that is like a stage of our own lives. That first reading being the childlike wonder and awe, you know, and then later, you know, the more rational and inquisitive brain kicks in. It's like, well, how did it do that? You know, oh, I see this here. Oh, that's what set me up for this. I didn't notice that the first time, you know, the wisdom, the you know, and so eventually, you know, you read the right book enough times and you've sort of lived a whole life through that book and you've become a whole person. Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's what we say. Yeah.
You've talked about a couple of books in different things I've read and heard, and I'm just like we mentioned a little bit ago, The Executioner's Song. I mean, it's just crazy how many books that I bring up to people and they haven't really read, or they know a little bit about them, but that I've heard you mention specifically that I have read and really, like, they've really done something profound to me. The other one is Franny and Zooey. The first time, the first time I read that, I mean, I had chills as I was reading it. And that's when I knew that, you know, Salinger, of course, was a huge name by the time I got around to reading them. And I never read Salinger in school. I came to him later as an adult. And I just remember I was kind of like, I'd better read Catcher in the Rye. And then but it was Franny and Zooey for me that,
yeah.
I mean, I
No,
couldn't
that's my favorite.
believe.
That's my favorite book of his. Yeah, for
Wow.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's. I mean, that book. That's a mind blowing book. Like, and every time I read it, there's like a new thing. You're just like, there's nothing that isn't perfectly observed. Like, it's just like he sees in like sort of like 4D the entire time. Like anything. Like the way someone smokes a cigarette. Like it's just like, you know, you have. I think the page of Zooey, the scene of Zooey shaving, I think is like 20 pages long or something. And it's totally amazing. You're just like, you're watching a guy shave and like, you know, I mean, it's
and that's coming back around. It's funny because normally stuff like that is associated with the maximalist books, but it's certainly not a maximalist book.
No.
I remember being really struck by the italics, the use of italics in the book to capture that intonation of this, you know, the Glass family sort of diction. And I was like, man, this is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, italicizing just syllables instead of the whole word a lot of times.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a great move.
It very well could have been the first book I encountered that really did that, and especially to that degree. And I just thought, this is brilliant because these characters, I know these types.
They sound,
you know, I know this type of person. Another highlight of the book for me is Gurian's 9/11 essay for the take-home social studies midterm, where he basically writes a treatise on the game of slap slap and then upbraids the teacher for asking such asinine questions of them in the first place. Now, in your interview with the Jewish Book Council, I noted that despite beginning work on the instructions in October 2011, shortly after getting to Syracuse, you said that we shouldn't make too big a deal about the connection to 9/11 because you'd been thinking about terrorism for a long time before then. The first time I read your book, Columbine was more pertinent to my mind given the setting, and sure enough, Columbine is explicitly cited elsewhere in your book. What I want to home in on, though, is a particularly chilling line. One of those lines in a book that brings all of my readerly momentum to a halt. It says, "It turned out we'd just always wanted enemies." Gurian does clarify that this doesn't apply to everyone, only some. So for me, for example, I truly do not want enemies to the point where like I would gladly just stay kind of holed up in my little library here and read and stay disconnected. But he's talking about a specific type of people. He, of course, has himself and his Israelites in mind. And they're talking about not just any enemy, but a worthy enemy. But, you know, this idea, can you talk a little bit about this idea that for some people, such as Gurian, what they really want in life are worthy enemies?
First, also one thing, and maybe you'll fix this in that editor, but it was October 2001 that I started, not 2011.
What did I say?
But you said 2011. I know you know it's 2001.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I was thinking about there was really what was, I mean, maybe I was being disingenuous with the Jewish Book Council. I don't remember that interview. But like, I think, I shouldn't say that. With the Jewish Book Council, I think I was thinking, I have my whole life been thinking about terrorism because I'm a Jewish person with an Israeli mother, and Israel has been attacked by terrorists my entire life. And I was very aware of it. We were worried about our family in certain situations where, you know, like there's it was not, when 9/11 happened, I was, my thought was really like, okay, I didn't get panicky. Like I didn't understand quite how big a deal it was for a little longer than most people, because to my mind, I was like, yeah, terrorism is a thing that happens all the time. You know, like I didn't quite understand the scale, like at that moment, but there were some pretty brutal terrorist attacks in Israel throughout history and throughout, you know, recent history throughout my life. And so I think I wasn't thinking specifically about 9/11 in that sense. However, there was this thing that happened in the States after 9/11, which was very strange to me. And it shouldn't have been. It was just that I happened to come of age, you know, in the 90s when, you know, like really it was like we're immediately post-Cold War. And it's like, and, you know, people talk about it more sort of overtly now, but it's like just how unipolar the world was and how it was just like it wasn't like a sense of victory or even a sense of I never thought of myself, and this is what I'm kind of getting to. I didn't think of myself as an American, really, and I don't think anyone that I grew up with did. Like, I was a Chicagoan, I was a Jew. There were a whole bunch of things I was identity-wise, And everyone around me is the same thing. There were a lot of immigrants where I was, in the suburb I was in. There were a number of Jews. There's a pretty relatively high population of Jews for a suburb. I think it was like 30%, you know.
Yeah.
But it was like there are the Jewish kids, there's the Korean kids, there's a lot of Korean immigrants, there's the Russian kids. There's like and so if we had any kind of identity other than that, it was Chicago, as in, which also meant not Midwest, but Chicago, which also meant not New York. It meant not the South. It meant, you know, like, and my sense of the world was that or of the United States was that was how it was in the U.S. in general. I don't know if I was right or wrong. I hadn't been all around, but I loved that that's how it was, which now looking back, I'm like, I love that that's how I thought it was, which is actually pretty American. I was like, the whole point of this place is to not give a shit about nationalism. Is that like you get to come here and there's peace and you're just all good. And then I'm getting back to 9/11. 9/11 happened, and it was like, you know, people were talking about patriotism in this like earnest way, and they were wearing all the senators and everyone on TV was wearing those American flag pins all of a sudden. Yeah, and I got really freaked out by it. Like I was like, this is, and for reasons I wasn't fully able to articulate to myself. It was. I was like, why now I have to like think of myself as an American? I'm being asked to think of myself as an American. And I just like sort of automatically rejected this, not because I don't like America. I fucking love America. Like, I'm from here. But like, I was like, I kind of love it because I don't have to think about what it means. And now I'm being told, you know, you got to think about yourself this way. And this is what it means. It's this flag and it's this, you know, and I think that there was a large part of the population, it turned out, that was kind of psyched about that. Like no one was, I'm not claiming anyone was psyched that we got attacked by terrorists, but I think there was some weird like relief or something that we knew who we weren't, and that was our enemies, right? And it made things a bit easier. Like we were getting a little uncomfortable not seeing ourselves as underdogs in any way. In a unipolar world where we're dominating everything, we can just like that doesn't rhyme that well with our notions of American identity or of any kind of literary identity or, you know, whatever, you know, hero's identity that we want. We're not underdogs. But if some billionaire asshole can crash planes into a building and kill a bunch of innocents in our country, then like maybe we're not so much the overdog, right? Like, and now we got an enemy, and he's a worthy enemy. He killed a bunch of us, and there's some weird relief in that. And I think it's like, I do think that's kind of human. I think it's pretty icky, and I'm not saying that like we all have that in us. Like I don't know us all, like, but there was a story that we were suddenly allowed to tell that we hadn't been allowed to tell before about ourselves, at least for 15 years or something, 11 years, you know.
Yeah, man, that's you're really, like, as you're talking, you're really describing some things that, you know, I myself remember a change, you know, besides just the explicit things that were shown on the news. I was in Virginia at that time. All of us have our 9/11 story of what happened and how we found out everything. But I do remember the huge backlash. We started then hearing all the reports of angry patriotic New Yorkers beating up Indians, Sikhs. Like people who didn't have anything to do with bin Laden and his people. It's just like anybody who like kind of looked Middle Eastern was suddenly, you know, and I remember all that kind of stuff. But, you know, you've really made me think. I remember this time where like I never saw an American flag, like, and like except in the classroom, you know, or not even the classrooms. It was usually like in the assembly hall, you know, at school or in some governmental building. But suddenly, like, I do remember this change where it really stood out to me that I would drive down the road and I'd see an American flag on the front of someone's house. Yeah. You know, where it used to be just like this thing, like as the seasons changed, you know, the lady would put a different, whatever those are called, flags or whatever. Like, I remember that standing out to me. And I think you really nailed something about, like, it did unleash this sort of story or whatever that now we're able, you know, that we're supposed to take on as identity. That's really kind of brilliant. I didn't expect this question to go in that direction, but it really stirred some thoughts for me. No, it's good. I recently listened to some remarks from this high IQ'd super genius where he said that natural language, actually, like English, like you and I would speak, natural language actually has extremely high fidelity. It's just that we don't learn to use it precisely enough. This was in response to mathematics being more precise than language. Many pure mathematicians, of course, believe that the language of the universe is mathematics, in contrast to a view presented in your book that it is made out of and sustained by spoken language, by God rapidly speaking his name. But I was thinking about this in light of Gurian's sort of midrash, if I can call it that, on the word as being pivotal to an understanding of Abraham's symbolically attempted filicide in Genesis 22. Gurian begins by kind of humorously and indirectly waving away Kierkegaard. He says, the tale of Abraham's 10th test is not about faith, no matter how bad any Israelite or Danish scholar wants it to be. According to Gurian, whose biological father is, like we said, a lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, who notably is defending a sort of neo-Nazi in the book, just to complicate some of the identity of it. But God, according to Gurian, uses his own lawyerliness to place his as in that shady commandment. Natural language seems to me to always present sort of a tension between ambiguity and precision. And the only way to offset the former with the latter is through verbosity, which connects with your book's epigraph from 1 Samuel 15:23 and a passage from Gurian's 7th grade social studies midterm essay again, which reads, you cannot simplify what is complicated without subtracting subtlety and thereby richness. And the willful subtraction of subtlety, no matter how practical it may be or seem to be, strikes me as a non-scholarly, even anti-scholarly endeavor. And one thing about Gurian is that he very much values the office of the scholar. Hence, in the same essay, we get 30 pages dedicated to properly describing the game of slap-slap with the verbosity required to attain a high level of precision. Interestingly, too, I couldn't find a translation of the verse from Samuel that used verbosity for the Hebrew word hapshar. Only stubbornness, arrogance, insubordination, defiance, which came from Robert Alter, only those were used. Never could I find verbosity. So I'm guessing that may be from the Adam Levin translation. This direct... Oh, it's not.
No, it's what edition, man? I have it in the other room. No, there's a Tanakh. It's Samuel 15:23. It's verbosity is like the iniquity of idolatry. It's you got a stone edition?
Is it this one?
Yes, it is that one.
Okay. Oh, I turned almost straight to it. It's the only thing I didn't check, and I should have. Now it seems silly that I wouldn't have checked that. Oh my goodness, look at that. For rebelliousness is like the sin of sorcery, and verbosity is like the iniquity of idolatry. Well, yeah. I stand corrected. Okay, so it's in the stone, so it's not Levin. All right, let's move on. Okay, but this directly accords, that translation directly accords, in my view, with Gurian's character. His verbosity is not what some could say is his author's, meaning you, self-indulgent bloviating, but rather the concomitant outcome of Gurian's rebellious nature, because it seems the translations, this is sort of a conflation of stubbornness and insubordination, defiance through verbosity. Right. Now, where I think this gets interesting is in your conceit that the novel, the instructions, is really Gurian's scripture. In scripture, Gurian yearns for precision through verbosity, defiance, stubbornness. Like we said, he has found that in order to get this thing so perfect that if it gets translated through various languages, it'll come back to the English intact, Yeah. But in your novel, as you've said elsewhere, you do want some deliberate ambiguity and inconclusiveness in the instructions, the novel, so that the reader has some grappling to do. I can't walk away and say, oh, Gurian's horrible. He should have done this, this, and that. He's totally culpable. I hate him. What are your thoughts on this? And how did you balance? It's just amazing that you balanced this verbosity required of the character and of his level of scripture and precision on both sort of frames, the scripture and the novel.
Well, first of all, thank you. All right, let me unpack that for a second. I had a thought, and then it went away. Then you said a very nice thing, and I was like, but ask me the question one more time. Go back like 3 sentences back of what you asked.
Yeah, so where I think this gets interesting is in your conceit that the novel, The Instructions, is really Gurian's scripture. In scripture, writing his scripture, he yearns for precision, which can only come through verbosity, defiance, and stubbornness. But in the novel, as you've said elsewhere, you want some deliberate ambiguity and inconclusiveness so the reader has some grappling to do. What are your thoughts on that? How did you balance that tension between verbosity and precision on both levels, the scripture and the novel?
Well, how I did it, I don't know. I guess I got really lucky. But I think that notion is like to describe the world precisely, at least by Gurian's lights, and I think by mine as well. You create ambiguity. Or you reveal ambiguity, I should say, because the experience of life and the experience of the world is an ambiguous one. You know, you don't, like, if you come you come to the end of your day. I mean, I don't know if anyone actually does this. I don't do it. But at the end of the day, you lay down in bed and you go, was that a good day or a bad day? That's a ridiculous question to ask, right? It was always both. No matter how good a day, no matter how many good things happen, how many bad things. So it's like, so it is not like life. A book that has you come away from it more sure of things does not enhance life. It just, it simplifies it and makes it kind of silly. It makes it, tellable. And I think that the goal of fiction for me, the fiction that I love to read, and the fiction that I try to write, is to make the world is to sort of destroy a reader's and my own sense of understanding of full understanding of the world. I want to come out the other side of a book being like, there's so much more in the world that I can think about that I haven't thought about yet or considered long enough or deeply enough. I want that much more than I want like some answer or some metaphor by which to think about the world. So, and one of the things when I was writing the book that I was very sensitive to was, and in some cases, this, for some readers and reviewers, that I feel like they didn't, because some got it, some didn't.
Yeah.
But there were the ones that didn't, it upset me a little, because I was very much thinking like, okay, people are going to read this allegorically to a certain degree. That was partly deliberate, like to sort of have an allegory that breaks itself. But like, they're going to read it as this is about the Jews and in Israel and the Palestinians. And who are the Jews and who are the Palestinians? I think that what I wanted was there to be some level of ambiguity, like throughout, where it was like sometimes Gurian sounds like a terrorist. Sometimes he sounds like a freedom fighter. We make that distinction. Sometimes he sounds like the person who's actually in power, not the one who's being attacked. And to sort of like leave that ambiguous so that you can actually think about those concepts. Maybe this is what it can be shortened to, which is this clear way to say it is, I don't want the reader to come out of the instructions saying, I know what terrorism is, and the Jews are the terrorists or the Palestinians are the terrorists. I want them to sort of come out of it thinking, wow, terrorism is really complicated, and maybe we should, these are the wrong questions to be asking about whatever conflict is happening if they're going to think about the book as being somehow about Israel, which I also kind of wanted to prevent as much as possible.
I really loved what you said about, you don't write ambiguity, you reveal ambiguity.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect. And you also do a really good job. I think you did a really good job about, it really helped to explicitly have Gurian assert this notion of Israelites to sort of drive attention away from that allegory of Jews. I think that worked really well, because now you're thinking about this other thing, this new entity that's sort of divorced from that, at least for me. That leads perfectly into this. There are a couple of moments that haunt me in this book. Number one is when Emmanuel Liebman says, false messiahs haunt our history. We have followed them and suffered greatly for it. And the other is Eliyahu's tragedy on Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem. I think it's very notable, by the way, that that street is named after who is routinely cited as the father of the modern Hebrew language, Ben Yehuda. It feels very appropriate for your book that that would be in there. But also in 2002, on the trip to Israel that Michael Silverblatt was supposed to be on with me, and then unfortunately couldn't go, while we were going down Ben Yehuda Street and we were really close to the kosher McDonald's there, our tour guide pointed just a little bit down the street and said that she was nearly killed by a bomb that went off on that street. Yeah. And so as I was reading your book this time around, I had this flurry of thoughts around this, which kind of went as follows. I wonder if Adam is referring to a real historical bomb that went off on Ben Yehuda. I wonder if he was there himself, because I know you've been to Israel at least once. Yeah. I wonder if it was the same historical blast that my tour guide experienced. And so, you know, I thought, what if this blast is the same blast that Eliyahu, Adam, the guide, and I was right there now as I was reading about it? So pure personal curiosity, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't believe, I mean, you know, it's hard to remember what I look up at the time. I'm not big on research, but I am like, there are things I get nervous about that I'm remembering wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I'll check them, but then I'm not like, you know, but there were, as I remember it, there were a number of bombings on Ben Yehuda Street. Cause it's, you know, it's New Jerusalem. It's a, you know, it's the, and it's, and so it's pretty much all Jews. So, you know, most bombings are, you know, they're happening in Tel Aviv. But in Jerusalem, if they're going to happen over there.
Yeah.
And so there were definitely some bombings there. I wasn't thinking of one in particular that I can recall.
Okay.
There's a chance that I like looked up to see like what were, you know, certain during the Second Intifada, what was going on, where were the bombings happening the most. But I think there were a number. I feel like in the news, I remember it's that's what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my readerly imagination kind of going a little bit crazy there, but and of course we're talking about Jerusalem, and I'm trying to zero in on maybe one bombing, which is kind of absurd.
Right. Well, no, what's even scarier is that it might be any number of bombings, right?
Right.
Like that's what's really horrible about it.
Every time I've been there, you know, at some point we're going to start getting news of rockets being fired, and you just really have faith in the Iron Dome there for a while.
Yeah. I was the last time I was there was so long ago. There was no Iron Dome.
Oh,
and
my.
It was the rockets weren't really happening. Yeah, when I was there, the last time I was there was '96. I was there for a couple months, and the thing that happened there was the Jewish archaeologists had just started accessing the Hasmonean tunnel, which is like this tunnel from the Hasmonean dynasty. I'm saying wrong, the Hasmonean dynasty that is under, sort of behind the Wailing Wall, you know, and in front of it. I went in it, but there was this thing that's the common call to get Palestinians to rise up, where the claim was the Jews are trying to tunnel under Al-Aqsa to blow it up.
Right.
And that was right after the Israeli government had allowed Palestinian police to have weapons. They'd given them weapons. They'd given them firearms.
Yeah.
And those firearms got turned on Israelis for the first time. And so it was like, that was a weird thing, and that was happening like really like basically four city blocks from where I was staying. I was staying just inside Jaffa Gate.
Wow.
But what was strange was my mother, I was at this hostel, and my mother had called our cousin and was like, "Where's my son?" And like he told her which hostel I was at, and she called the hostel. You know, I'm like 19, and like I answered the phone, she's like, "Is everything all right?" And I'm like hungover, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, everything's fine. And she was like, "'Cause there's crazy things, be careful." And I was like, I'll be fine. And, you know, I got off the phone, and it was like, I went outside, and I was like, I talked to some people at the hostel, and they were like, yeah, there's some shit going on. And you know, these weren't dumb people. Like, they were just like, they're like, you know, and then I walked out into the old city in Jerusalem, and it was like, yeah, life is going on. Like, I was like, this is I was like, things are getting really, and just, you know, it makes you sort of reflect on how the American news cycle was beginning to change. So it was just like, by the minute, it was, you know, like, you know, you had cable news going on. It needs to report on something, so it turns it into a much bigger event than it was. Although I think in context now, like, looking back at it historically, it was a pretty big event, but it didn't feel that way.
All right, two questions, and they're both easy. We're wrapping up now. I'm pretty sure This is the only book I've ever read where, in the midst of a crescendo of violent calamity, the characters start indulging in book talk and recommendations. My first demand, Gurion states for the news stations and police, is the last great Jew. I want you to get Philip Roth on the phone. To which one of his cohorts replies, "Who's Philip Roth?" And then another responds, "The greatest American novelist who isn't DeLillo or McCarthy." Gurion's ear is caught by that name DeLillo, and he asks how to spell it and where he should start. End Zone to start with, then White Noise. And then this is great. Then comes the punchline to this already sort of hilarious and absurd gag. "McCarthy's Blood Meridian, though. I'd read that one first. Seems more your style." And there are other similar great moments, like the excerpt from Fresh Air with Terry Gross as the as the epigraph to the Gurionic War, the spot-on parody of journalism in the footnote on page 763, where you talk about Malcolm Gladwell had a piece in the New Yorker, and Time ran a pop psychology, blame it on the mother article. I mean, it's just spot on. That was the first page of the commentary on commentaries. And then you even do little moments where I feel like you give us a little wink, such as when Eliyahu says, "And you don't know me from Adam."
Yeah. Yeah, that was supposed to be a little wink.
Yeah. Okay. But I don't have a great framed question, and I hate to ask something as dull as what was it like for you writing this in or whatever, but I mean, honestly, unless you can, I can't think of another book that has this incredibly, almost blockbuster scale, cinematic, dramatic, violent ending. And then the characters start trading book recommendations in the midst of it.
Yeah, I can't either. I mean, I think that's probably kind of why I was doing it. I was like, this will be funny. Like, this is like, there's like a thing where it's sort of just like, it's in a way it's non sequitur, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's also speaking to what the book is after in those specific titles and those specific authors. And I think, I don't know. I think I liked the idea of it. Like, and I do think that, it's weird because it's little kids talking about these books that are not for kids.
Right.
But like, if it were, I mean, if they were talking about a rock band or something, like that, you could sort of see that happen.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't know. And again, I think it's that thing where like life is really full, and any moment you're not like on some track where you're living some very specific narrative. All sorts of weird shit is happening all the time.
Yeah.
So like anything can pop in. You're going to the grocery store, and then suddenly you see, I don't know, you see like a fist fight happening on the other side of the street. It has nothing to do with you, but it's like, you definitely weren't like, I'll see a fist fight on my way to the grocery store. Yet that's the thing you're going to remember about the walk. Like I don't know. And I think there's some sense to me where that's like a form of realism that's not that I like. I like when it happens. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to like bantering characters, like banter is too diminishing. When it comes to the way characters talk, like I do really love, I think of like the dialogue in like White Noise.
Yeah.
And just like how it's coming from all these different sides. You'll have the kids in the kitchen and they're just throwing stuff in. You're like, that actually feels much more real to me than someone having a, very focused conversation in a lot of ways. Like, people don't stay on topic.
Absolutely not. Not in my family at all. Yeah. Actually, my wife, who's an only child, they may be the only family that talks to each other and like stay on topic and stay focused. It was very, very overwhelming for her, like at first, when she would come over to my family's house for Thanksgiving, and because everybody, especially my mom and me, we start 100 threads and then sort of like cycle around them, and I don't think they ever even finish. They'll go for years.
It's the family noise.
Yeah. Last question. We're at the last question, man. This has been awesome. Obviously, you and I, between our emailing over the last couple of years and now talking today, finally, obviously, I really value your recommendations for books because I feel like we have similar tastes. Another book that came up in some of our early emails was Edouard Levin, The Auto Portrait. And I was just so excited. The same with The Executioner's Song and Franny and Zooey, because like obviously you read it, you loved it too.
Yeah.
You've talked about a friend of yours who's a writer, maybe Ben something, who wrote Auto Portrait, kind of.
Jesse Ball.
Jesse Ball. That's it. What did I say? I don't know. Just to close this thing off, like, if you could just recommend one book. This isn't I'm not putting you through Ben Linder's book list, which he had me with a legal pad. I had like that scene from a movie where a lawyer is crunching their closing remarks the night before, and I'm trying to assemble all my list, my gateway books, and all that. So I'm not asking for like your favorite book of all time, but just, not necessarily your favorite book, just one that comes to mind, and you're like, Chris, you got to read this one.
I mean, there really are, like, see, the thing is, you want a novel, right? Rather than like a collection of stories.
Whatever. No, it could be a collection of stories.
I mean, yeah, okay. Let me think for a second. I mean, the first one that comes to mind, it's like, I'm trying to think. Like, I have, because I have, like, on my sort of I was saying before, I want to start rereading stuff again, stuff I haven't reread in a while. So the thing I'm going to go to pretty soon, I have it stacked up, is I Serve the King of England by Oyumo Rabal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, he's great.
You know that book?
I have not read that one. I've read Too Loud a Solitude and Closely Watched Trains.
Dude, I Serve the King. That's the one.
Okay.
Man. That's
all right.
I'm really, really read that again. I would say that's such a killer book. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember when I came across Bohumo Karabal, but it was Too Loud a Solitude, and I was just floored. I was like, I got to read everything, and I've only read one other book since then. That'll be the one.
Yeah. I have 3 other books. I have Too Loud a Solitude here, and I have I think it's called Dancing Lessons for the Advanced in Age, which is like one of the one sentence books. Yeah, but I haven't read them yet. Like but I Serve the King of England. I read a couple times, and maybe even 3 times, but it's been a number of years now, and I love that book. Like, that book hit me really hard instantly, and it didn't disappoint on the reread. So
that'll be the one. Hey, speaking of one sentence books, have you read Laszlo Krasznahorkai yet?
Man, I can't. I'll be honest with you. I can't get through. I've tried 3 Krasznahorkai books now.
Okay, which ones?
I can't get through one. I get very frustrated. I start out and I'm excited. Like, I got I got 70 pages into Satan Tango, 70 pages into Melancholy of Resistance. And I have the New Directions one and That Beautiful Thing. Yeah. That beautiful, storybook, edition. Yeah. And I was like, all right, this will be the one. And then I just stop giving a fuck. I'm like, I don't, because I get really puzzled. Yeah. Like, I get puzzled by why his sentences are shaped the way they are, and why, and it might be a translation thing. Yeah. It might not. I feel like there's something wrong with me regarding Krasznahorkai. Pretty much everyone I know loves him. Sure. And like, I can't, I will, I tell myself now, it's like, I'm going to wait like 5-6 years. Yeah. And I'll give him another go. Cause I've tried.
Now, I tell people all the time, like, I very clearly, like, the one that always comes to mind for me is Thomas Wolfe's Look Homeward, Angel. The first time I tried to read that, I was so frustrated by it that I almost literally threw it across the room at about 70 pages in. And then for some reason, it may have been about 4 or 5 years later, it just sort of bubbled up in my mind. And it's this weird thing that happens. And I thought, you know what? Let me go back and see. And I read it cover to cover. I mean, not in one sitting, but just loved it. Now it's this beautiful book in my memory. So you never know, man. Yeah. Who knows why we don't? Well, man,
the similar thing happened to me like, sort of recently, where it was slightly different in that, like, when I read Bolaño for the first time, I read 2666, and I freaked out for it. I thought this is a great, like, it was stunning. Yeah. And then I read Savage Detectives, and Savage Detectives was one of the most disappointing things I've ever read. Oh. And like, and it was, I was like, this is terrible. However, then like I was aware of, I know how my brain works, and and I was like maybe it's just because I was looking for it to be 2666 and it's not 2666. Right. And then like 3 or 4 years ago, I just thought I'm gonna give this another go, because I'd since read a bunch more Bolaño, and I love Bolaño. Like on the whole, like it's just he's gonna hit more than he isn't. Oh yeah. And man, the second time I read Savage Detectives, I read that book in like 2 days. I like, didn't do anything else. I was like, this is actually excellent.
That's wild to me. Everyone said. It's so wild. It's almost like that first attempt like kind of primed us in a way, even though it was a negative prime. It primed us for years down the road. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
all right, so we'll take that as the one book. We could go on and on. I feel like we're getting dangerously close to going down and trading names and so on. But I want to respect your time. I know you're coming off of a huge book tour bender.
Yeah.
Again, the instructions, I'm just going to show people the front of it. You don't get to see the back. You have to buy it for that. It is in 2 volumes, and it has this cool little sleeve around it. It's just a beautiful edition. Whoops, I teased the back there. I'll cut that out.
That's all right. No. That was good. That was a quick one.
Hey, I really, really appreciate your time, man, and hope to talk to you again soon. Can't wait to see where your career goes from here.
Thank you, man. Thanks. It was really great talking to you, Chris. I really love your show, and this was a great interview. I had a blast. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, Adam, go get some sleep. We'll talk to you again sometime soon.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, you too.